Well, good afternoon. Those who will be watching this on, is it YouTube? Yeah. What I'd like to do today is take a look at a real old commandment and see if we can come up with something maybe you never heard before. That old commandment, you all know which one it is. It's number 4. Number 4. For centuries, religious people have tried to divorce themselves from the 4th commandment. And they don't mind the other 9, but that 4th, and they want to get away from that altogether. Coming over here, this is what they call the weekend. I've never seen so much traffic. I don't know where they're going, but there are. This is just one place. So on any even given weekend, the highways are filled full of people going someplace. I don't know where they're going, but they are. They're wanting to get away from home, go out and breathe the air, whatever they want to do. And what they're doing, they're fanatically working in order to get away from work. That's what they're doing. They're working in order to get away from work. So what is the problem? Well, they're enslaved. They're enslaved to the world of work. That's what the problem is. They may have leisure time, but they don't use it leisurely. In fact, the frantic weekend, you can tell the difference between the work week and the weekend. It's still work. Like I say, they're working to get away from work. It's probably much more work to get away from work than work. But there they are. But this is where this old commandment comes in, the 4th commandment. God simply says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. It's Exodus 20. To keep it holy. And not to do any work on that day. Exodus 20, 8 and 9. Of all the commandments, and we know that, maybe you who are watching this don't know this, but of all the commandments that God has given us, the 4th one is the one that comes under fire most of any of them, the 4th one. Theologians today assert that the Sabbath day was a specific institution given to the ancient Jews in order to keep them as a nation. The thing is, I didn't know Adam and Eve were Jews, because the Sabbath was created right after they were created, brought into existence. I guess they didn't know they were Jews either. They claimed that the Sabbath has nothing to do with one's relationship with God or a man. It's merely a hangover from bygone days. Theologian. People who got their nose stuck in the book. The thing is, most people, that would include atheists, can see that murder is wrong, can see lying is wrong, stealing is wrong. Atheists can see that. Theologians can see that. But that 4th commandment, when it comes to the theologians, sticks in their craw. They can't get away from it. Most people can see the logic in commandments about worshiping one God or taking his name in vain. They can figure that much out. But they can't figure the 4th one out. They just cannot figure that out. Why is that then so important? So, why, in their opinion, their beliefs, is the Sabbath left out? The religious people. One reason and one reason only. They cannot see the logic behind it. They don't know why it's there in the first place. They cannot see how keeping a period of time holy is possibly important to God. That's true. They cannot understand it. Why they don't understand this, the Sabbath is a means by which God protects his investment in human beings. That's us. He protects his investment. He's got a lot invested in us. There's one sitting at his right hand, put his life on the line for this day, for us to understand it. Now, if God just made the weekly Sabbath as a rest day, why didn't he just use some other day? What difference does it make? But here it is. If it's just a mere rest day, that's all it is. Why did he just choose any day instead of this one particular day that he set aside? The Sabbath is justified because it protects and enhances man's relationship to God. It exists to keep us in a proper frame of mind. Think about what I just said. It keeps you in a proper mind thinking process. This day here does it. No, the other day doesn't do that. This day does it. The day he set aside. So you and I live in this old grubby, materialistic world, don't we? The only thing we can see is physical things, material things. That's all we see. That's what our eyes see. That's what our mind is focused on. But when this day rolls around, everything changes. It changes. So it's hard to avoid anything spiritual, isn't it? People out here running around, they don't know anything spiritual about this day. They could care less about this day. Where's the city of Knoxville at today? They're trying to get to Gainesville, Florida, aren't they? That's what's important to them. Same thing in Kentucky, all these other schools. It's important they play their little game, kick that little bag of air around, throw it around. That's physical. So that's on their minds. Nothing spiritual is on their minds. This day has nothing in common with them. They could care less about it. And the religious people make the same thing. I remember reading in Herbert Armstrong's book, his autobiography. He wanted to baptize this person. So he went to this Baptist church because he didn't have a place to do it. And he talked to the senior pastor there. He came in and said, Mr. Armstrong, what day do you keep? Well, I keep the day Jesus Christ kept. What do you keep? What day do you keep? That made him mad. He's really got mad at her for saying that. He didn't know. Here's a Baptist preacher keeping the wrong day. He didn't know. So we live in this old grubby, materialistic world, and it's hard to think of things spiritual all the time. But when this day rolls around, things change for the people of God. Things change. So you have to take time to reconsider things, don't you, when this day rolls around. Think upon the realm other than the materialistic world. I lay in my swing like today, tomorrow. It's nice. And just watch. Watch the things around me. I say, God, how did you do that? How did you do that? How do you create things like this? And do much more so on this day. I spent about an hour this morning typing the 5th part of the New Covenant. What all it entails. And I'm learning more about God than I ever did before about these covenants things. Now, how important this day is to God. So we think about these things. There is no reason for a Sabbath day to rest. Then why does it exist? If there's no reason for a Sabbath day, as modern Christianity says, why does the day exist? It exists for you and I to consider God, to consider why you're on this earth, to consider what He's doing through you, to teach and to train all of us to be a part of His family. This is the only day that does that. No other day does that. Because God does exist. I just found something new that I did not know before to prove that God exists. And this came from a carnal-minded person. We have information, don't we? Where does the information come from? Where does it come from? This is a mathematician, a professor teaching at a college, asked that question. Where does information come from? Does it come from the wind, the elements, or where? It comes from a creative God. Where did you get your information? You know. Did you pull it right out of the air and put it in your brain? No. Someone put it in your mind, didn't it? God is the God of information. He's a creative God. That's where information comes from. That's what He put in Adam and Eve's mind, did He not? Information. And they abused it. That's what He does to us. That's why this day exists, put information in our mind. What do we do with it? What do we do with this information He's given us? Most people live a quiet desperation, squandering their lives away in a furious race to get to the end, never once considering why they're alive in the first place. They don't know why they're alive. But the Sabbath, that day, folks, marches to a different drumbeat. The Sabbath day. It presents us with an opportunity to consider the whys of life, not just the hows. It represents a chance to get our heads on straight, to know where one should aim his life. That's what the Sabbath is. That's how important it is. If they think God did away with that, That's silly. That is really silly. This world, with its work habits, gives us strong push for materialism. It does. That's why so many people in Japan, a few years ago, at least 25,000 committed suicide because they don't know anything about the Sabbath day. Their minds is strictly on doing things, building things, creating things. And that's not the way we were created to do that. There has to be a period to stop. And it's the seventh day God says to stop. So He made it holy. It consumes our life, and that's what cuts us off from God, this materialistic world. We don't take time. You can take time tomorrow, but that's just the first day of the week. That's just the first day of the week, work week. It has nothing to do with God in you. His presence is not there tomorrow. I don't care how nice they sound. His presence is not with the people who worship on Sunday. That is not the Lord's day. Jesus Christ made it very plain in Mark. He is the Lord of the Sabbath. That means the Sabbath is the Lord's day. It's holy. It's a convocation. It's where we come so we won't be cut off from God. Paul condemns these ancient thinkers in Romans, the first chapter, verse 28. And this is true. This is true today. You try to bring up God today and see what they say to you. Romans, the first chapter, verse 28. Even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. That's exactly what they're doing today. They don't want to know. They don't want to know the truth. They don't want to know there's a day set aside by God. It interrupts their materialistic lifestyle. And they don't want that to happen. They can't stand that. This is what David said in Psalms 10, verse 11. This is what the world says. This is what the world of religion tomorrow says. Modern Christianity says. He that says in his heart, God has forgotten. He hides his face, he will not see. In other words, God doesn't exist. He doesn't exist. A person can get so bound up in his work that he or she will never ask the question, why am I doing it? I've sat down and thought about this. And I ask myself questions like this. I'm born, I go to school, I either go on to college and get a job or some trade or find some job, start making money, get married, have kids, retire, quit, and die. What for? They never ask that question. What for? What's it all about? Why am I even doing this in the first place if all I'm going to do is die? What's the purpose of it? And when you stand off, and you've got to do this, you've got to stand off and look and ponder like I do the universe. I am so fascinated with this universe, I can't keep my mind off of it. Because I know one day it's going to be mine. Part of it, I'm going to co-owner with Jesus Christ. And He's going to show me around what I'm looking at through pictures of Hubble telescope. It just overwhelms me. To ponder our existence. How can we do that? You watching this on YouTube, do you ever ponder while you're alive? Do you ever ponder God's law? His creation. Well, I do that. I look at things and how do you do that? How do you do that? I don't understand how He can control this universe, and the distance is so great you have to measure them in light years, and He still sustains it, so it won't collapse in on itself. That's how much powerful He is, and I want to know how He does it. I want to know how He does it. So you have to think on these things. That's what He wants to. That's what this day is all about. To think about Him, think about your creation, think about your life, think of your calling, what you're doing here in the first place. To think about His creation and place ourselves consciously in the context of the whole universe, that we can be fully human. Think about what you're seeing. Just think about all these things. There is no other way in which the Sabbath can be made for man except for this. To ponder about God. To really seek your mind into Him, His creation, His ability to do things he does. His Son, Jesus Christ, who made it all possible, that we can even think about it at all. If he had defeated Satan, we wouldn't even be here. But he did. He did defeat it, and we're here. The church is here. The Sabbath day is still going on. It's for our good that we can ponder the realm of God, the universe, and all that entails. The Sabbath is not a binding force to enclose us. It's a liberating force, freeing our minds and bodies from the ordinary thought process of everyday existence. To get your mind off material things. The Sabbath is, in effect, it's a celebration of the end of God's work and the prospect of man's becoming God. Just the same way that God celebrates his accomplished by work by resting on the seventh day, so should we. That has never changed. He said, I change not. I remember watching this guy named Adrian. I can't think of his name now, but he had a big church down in Memphis, and the only reason I stopped to listen to him because he's talking about the Sabbath day. And he said it's impossible to keep. It's impossible to keep. Now think of what he's saying. He's dead now, so he's going to wake up and face Jesus Christ. He's dead now. If it's impossible to keep, then how did Christ keep it? Why would God give you some day with all these attachments to the Sabbath day, knowing that you can't keep them, and then punish you for it? Does that make sense? Oh, if Sabbath's so hard to keep, all he had to do is remove the restrictions. Would it be that simple? But they said, oh, he moved to the next day. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. This is the only day which you and I can sit down and really ponder our life and God and the existence of all this creation. And we're to rest just like he did. Atheists, all these philosophers, have been content to tell us that life is so absurd. It's just absurd. That off of man's life is merely a preparation for death. In other words, what they're saying, you live, and all you're doing is preparing to die, and there's nothing in between or after that. But that's not true, because they don't know the purpose of life. They don't keep the Sabbath day. No one's telling them. They're getting lies from Sunday morning preachers. I mean, if they're sincere, they believe what they believe, but they're lies. They're not true. They're Satan's ministers, as Paul wrote about that. God intends to make man into his image spiritually, and he has already made us that way physically. We're a pattern of what's in heaven, a pattern. The week of Sabbath day rest is a celebration of this fact, that we're made in his image. And soon, hopefully soon, the way the world is going now, it might be that long before Jesus Christ has to intervene in world affairs, or we're all dead, the way things are going. The Sabbath commandment embodies a principle as deeply moral as any other 10 commandments. The Sabbath affects the deepest part of our innermost beings. It is, in a sense, the commandment which God gave us to keep right internally, to keep our priorities, perspective rights in the way we are to look at reality. Look about you, folks. Look at you. Look what's going on around you. And see how bad it is. You and I know what's coming. The world doesn't, because they've been lied to. One of the biggest hoax, it's on the internet, one of our articles, one of the biggest hoax ever put up on man was the fact that I think it was the Greeks that did this. In order to control the human population or control their country or whatever it is, their city, they had to lie to them. If you're bad, you're going to go to hell. If you're good, you're going to go to heaven. It was all a big joke, all a hoax. And they wouldn't meet each other on the street corner and laugh about it. They have fooled people. And they would fit right in today if they went to church tomorrow, those people, if they were alive. It's just a big joke. Biggest joke is ever put on people. It gets our minds in the right perspective, this day does. To know while you're here is the greatest information God could ever give a human being. Now I walk around, I said, I know why I'm alive. And I see all these people, they don't. They don't know. But they're going to know. They're going to know. They're going to get their opportunity. And they're going to see when the veil is moved from their face, they're going to see just how important the Sabbath day is and how they have Well, the ancient house of Israel, they put their foot on it. They profaned the Sabbath day, as Ezekiel wrote about. And they're going to see this. And they're going to wake up to the fact how wrong they have been. And what a joy it is to be here. To be before the throne. You know, when you're here, I don't know if you ever think about these terms, you're appearing before the throne of God. This is where God's presence is. And He won't be there. He won't be there tomorrow. I don't care how right they sound. He will not be in their presence at all. But He's here. He is here in this little group, and a lot of little groups are trying so hard to obey Him, to keep this Sabbath day holy. And that's where His presence is. God intends for us to become just like Him. And to do that, we need the leisure time, which the Sabbath provides, to think about our lives. Do you think about that? Do you think about your life and what God has done for you? And He pulled me right out of a cesspool and put me right in His presence. I was the worst thing that ever walked on this earth, as far as I'm concerned. And I've often asked Him, so what in the world did you pick me for? You know how bad I was. I am. But it didn't make any difference. He still picked me. So it's up to me to make sure that I reach my potential. And this day helps a lot to do that. It's a leisure time to provide us to think about our lives, as Paul put it, to examine ourselves, to deeply examine yourself. Just think about you. You know what your mind is like. I know what my mind's like. I know what I think about. So you examine yourself and see if you're in the faith or not. And God made the Sabbath day to give us such an opportunity to examine ourselves. And here we are. Here we are. That's why the Sabbath day is so important to God. No other day is like this day. It was never done away with. He said, I change not. I change not. Still the Sabbath day. It's still part of the Ten Commandments. And to violate that, it's punishable by death and a lake of fire if it's not repented of. So that's why the Sabbath day is so important. No matter what the religious people say tomorrow. They're wrong and they're liars. It's just plain and simple.